This is the Baymaw Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today we continue our review of The Chosen with a discussion on the 6th episode.
Sixth episode. We got 3 left, 6, 7, and 8, Brent. Is that how this is going to work?
Yep, 8 in the first season.
All right. I got to say, as we record this, I'm enjoying the second season.
Oh.
It hasn't let me down yet.
I haven't started it.
All right. Well, we won't get into that. And you have some Christmas discussion buried somewhere that you might pull out of the old bag of tricks, I've heard. So you've told me.
Yep, it's on the schedule.
Is that a secret? I don't know. Well,
probably.
All right. Well, spoiler alert. Okay. Excellent. Speaking of spoiler alerts, we can let people know, if you're interested, don't listen to this episode till you've watched episode 6 of The Chosen. I don't have notes for like a few scenes of this episode, so we'll see what you got.
All right, so starts with it's this market scene. You see a sign for a pawnbroker. There's this long line of people, and I feel like there's a lot. It's saying a lot there that people are like, going through all of these hard times and trying to get a little bit of money to survive or whatever. You see a woman come out of the shop. She's upset. This other guy walks in, and the shopkeeper is asking him what he has, and he's like, you must be passing through. I don't recall seeing you before, which I feel like that says a lot too. Like, all of my people are coming back like on a weekly basis because they're continuing this hardship.
Right.
It's all, all subtext there, but he's like, well, I'm on my way to the Dead Sea. I was like, okay, you must be going to see John the Baptist probably. But he doesn't say that. The shopkeeper is kind of insinuating like, I haven't seen you before. I don't know who you are. Maybe these things that you have are pretty nice. Maybe they're stolen. And he's like, no, they're not stolen. They start talking about the price. And then the guy raises his arm to show him the tools. And then the shopkeeper noticed that he has leprosy. And so the shopkeeper covers his mouth and he shoves the man to the ground, tells him to get out. And surprisingly to me, the man actually took the money and left the tools and then went on his way, which I didn't expect it to play out quite like that. I figured he would just like go try to sell them to someone else. But
yeah, and I thought, my gut, and this will tell you, the thing that I assume about humanity, my assumption is that he would take the money and the tools. And if that's how people are going to treat me, and yet, especially in their day, so much of physical conditions like this, whether it's an illness or leprosy, there's all this spiritual superstition connected to it that you assume that this was somewhat judgment from God. And so I can imagine him like wanting to be actually a person of integrity and exchange those tools for a price because just make your condition worse in your mind. So I suppose that makes sense, but that, interesting.
Well, that is an interesting thought that he even had access to the money, and the fact that he might reach out, like, scared the shopkeeper enough not to try to take it back.
Right, absolutely.
Even though the man hadn't touched it yet.
Yep.
And now I'm questioning, like, did he actually leave the tools?
You said that, and I just assumed. I was like, well, Brent Billings doesn't miss any details. So he must have left the tools, but I'm not sure if he did leave the tools. I can't remember, Brent. What do we do now? Now we have to go back and watch it again.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing him having the tools later.
Right.
But I also don't know why we would have. So
right. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, if anyone noticed that detail, whether he actually took the tools with him or if he left them there, I'm curious. And then we see Matthew and Gaius standing there in the street. They're looking at this chest full of fish. Apparently, we don't actually see the fish.
I think it's a chest full of money. They have sold the fish.
Is it the money?
Oh goodness, yeah. There's no way all those fish fit in that trunk. So that's going to be
that's true.
All the coin, baby.
Well, either way, we didn't see inside, so
that's correct.
That does make more sense now that you said it. I'm a little off my game apparently today, Marty. I'm not noticing these
It
details.
was, it was dried fish. They had dried it and shrunk it up. It was all vacuum sealed. That's all, Brent. That's good. I like that.
So anyway, Matthew is attempting to explain to Gaius just how many fish there were during this catch.
Because everybody keeps saying 2 months, and Matthew's like 2 years and 7 weeks or whatever it was.
Well, I think that, the taxes were 2 years, but then Gaius asks him, how long has it been since Simon has been paid up?
Right. Yep.
And Matthew knows exactly how long it's been.
Yeah. Right.
And there were a lot of interesting details here, I thought. So he talks about a gratis period where it's like, okay, you just have to pay within, a year or whatever. But then he said that Simon got an extra year on top of that because of his marital exemption. So apparently Simon is more or less a newlywed.
Right.
At least within the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't catch that, but you're right. Yeah, sure.
Which I guess, I don't know. I just don't see, because I know it talks about that. Is that in Leviticus?
I want to say it's Deuteronomy. It feels Deuteronomy to me. Yeah.
Well, either way, like, that's a Jewish custom. So it's interesting that Rome would allow that. Like, yeah, sure, you don't have to pay taxes for a year because you got married.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's the exact marital custom. That could be. And Herod, I mean, are they insinuating that Herod collects his tax through the Roman tax system? Could be very possible, because that's where that's where your Herodian tax is going to come through, temple taxes. I don't know. I don't know how they would do the marital exemption, but that could be relevant.
Sure. So, meanwhile, Gaius is just like, look, we've got all this money sitting here. It's going to be fine. There's kind of a small crowd around them. And he's like, just act natural. And Matthew is like, I am being natural. What are you talking about? He's like, well, act normal.
Just, try to look natural.
I am natural. I look exactly how I feel.
Just try to act like a normal person under normal circumstances.
It's a great little exchange. And then some other soldiers approach, and they're like, we had to come see, what's going on here. And Marcus, the soldier who approaches, he does not believe the story of the fish. So Matthew's just got an uphill battle trying to convince everyone of what was going on here. So then we have Nicodemus speaking to a group about John the Baptist. He's like, look, I checked it out. There's no material threat to Herod or to public peace. It's going to be fine. He's just seeking attention. People hear all this yelling and screaming. They're going to check it out just because they're curious. But once they see him, they're going to know what's really going on. And if we try to keep him silent, we're just legitimizing him. So Shmuel admits at that point that he was the one who turned John in, and then there's a little bit of an argument there, and the council judge, or whatever he was, calls out Shmuel and says, your actions were rash. And Nicodemus is like, look, I'll deal with all this.
Yeah, there are all kinds of things in this scene that I liked. I liked the play between, there's one Pharisaical worldview, probably represented by Shmuel, that's about politics, and then you see Nicodemus trying to be a Pharisee of principle. So politics versus principle. I love the comment about how what John is doing is not our baptism. We talked on the podcast about the difference between Essene baptism and Pharisee baptism, and what John's doing out at the river. Like Nicodemus is like, it's not even our baptism. Like why should we be? It's not the ritualistic Pharisaical mikveh that we're used to. It's the it's a more Essene driven mikveh. I love the when this whole thing starts with the council member, with the elder there, that judge character, like there's a completely open, legitimate, like, what do we do? By the time it plays itself out, there's a definite student-teacher dynamic at play that this elder then this council member completely upholds. Because it was like this open debate. By the time the conversation gets had, it's like, I can't even believe you would do this because you're the student, he's the teacher. And I thought that was a really appropriate dynamic that you see played out there from a historical perspective. I like that.
So then we see the disciples outside of town. They're disassembling their tents, apparently getting ready to go wherever they're going. Simon and James are taking apart one tent and discussing how, James, and this is little James, was about to join a Jerusalem choir, the 288. which, Marty, I don't know. I found out about this after the fact. Do you know what that is in reference to?
I don't. Educate me. I love this. This come from the commentary. What's going on here?
Yeah. It's a reference to 1 Chronicles 25.
Okay.
So check it out. It's a great little thread to pull on.
Was there like 288 singers? And Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Sweet.
So then James is like, yeah, I'll show you what's going on. So he sings a song, and everyone's like, okay. And Simon's like, yeah, I see why Jesus picked you. It's clear. And James is like, look, nothing is clear. Like, only Jesus knows what I'm going to become. Whether that's a singer or not, I have no idea. And so they're kind of, exploring their purpose as disciples.
Yep.
And then Jesus comes in and he tells Simon, like, look, you got to go ahead of us. Eden's Iman needs help. Like, you have some responsibilities. Just go on ahead. It'll be fine. So then we're back to Matthew and Gaius, and they're now with Quintus. And Quintus is like, look, the numbers have not been this good in a long time. And he's like, maybe this Simon guy, seems like he's unreliable, right? But all of a sudden, under pressure, he delivers. So maybe he can do it again. And so he's trying to, like, figure out how he can leverage this for his own advantage. And Matthew's trying to explain, like, look, it wasn't Simon. He's like, yeah, I don't care. I'm going to have my own interpretation of this. You are just a simple person. You don't understand what was going on. It doesn't matter who was helping him. If he has the power to convince people to help him, then that's just as good to me. Then a soldier comes running in, says Herod's envoy is nearby, and Quintus is like, okay, we got to get prepared for this. I guess they're expecting a senator. I was a little confused about what was happening there, but whatever. And then Matthew continues to say, like, look, there was no trickery, there's no deception. I was watching the whole thing. There's lots of things I don't understand, but I can make observations, and I didn't see anything out of whack there. So Quintus, like, lays out this scenario for Matthew, and it's like, well, how would you respond to this thing? And I loved this line. And I think Quintus is like, what is he going to say to his people in response to this? And Matthew says, I would show them my plans for infrastructure.
Conquest is not simply conquering nations, but imposing a way of life.
Right. Yeah. And that was I loved that little Roman. There's so many pieces and layers of that. It was just so that was well done. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm falling over my words, but I appreciated that little section of that scene. That was good.
And that particular line is just like, man, what a great little encapsulation of, like, the Hellenistic way of conquering the world. Because we talked about that, I think, probably early in session 3, where it's like Alexander the Great came in and conquered, but then he established all these things and made you love the Greek lifestyle.
Exactly. Yep. So,
like, he can conquer you once, but if he can get you on his side, then he's got you forever. And so I just thought that was a great way of, like, putting that idea into Matthew's line. So then we're back to the disciples. They're walking along. We see a woman picking flowers, and Jesus asks her if her necklace is Egyptian. She's like, yeah, I grew up there. My father's from Ethiopia. And then Jesus starts speaking Egyptian, and he's like, hey, I also grew up in Egypt. And she's like, oh, well, I'm Tamar. And he introduces himself, and then the disciples are like, wait a second, you speak Egyptian? And so they're asking about this, and Jesus says he was fleeing from Bethlehem, and Big James says, like, oh, I know that story, the massacre of the infants. And Jesus is just kind of coy about it, and like, yeah, that happened. It was pretty bad, but he doesn't push on it too much. So I figure we're probably going to come back to that Bethlehem connection later.
Yep, and I appreciated we mentioned this before in a previous episode, but I appreciated the awareness of racial ethnic diversity there, where they have a much darker skinned woman representing the Egyptian. I mean, going back to our episode with Portia, I thought that was well played. I've had some follow up emails. I've had a lot of follow up emails to that episode, but one of the emails was just really wanting to dive deeper. And I'm not an expert in what those historic, racial cues were, like how how far south do you get and what is the implications? What are the impacts of that on things like that kind of diversity of skin tone and that kind of thing? But I thought there was an awareness there that after thinking about it, after talking about it, I just went, oh, hey, check that out. That was, at least in part, I appreciated that. That's something that I wouldn't have thought of or expected or looked for, and it was there. I liked it.
Yeah, and it would totally make sense to have people from all over the place. This crossroads of the earth idea that we talked about, way back, episode, what was that? 34, 35, somewhere in there. So yeah, like they're going to have people from everywhere. So for Jesus to be walking around and to come upon a wide variety of people is not surprising, I think.
Not at all. Yeah.
So then they turn to move on, and the man with leprosy from the opening scene approaches, and Mary screams, and the disciples are like, don't come any closer. They pull out their knives, and Jesus is like, whoa, calm down. He tells them not to worry. He puts down his bag, and then Jesus approaches the man, and he begins pleading with Jesus, and he's like, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. He says that he knows Jesus because his sister was a servant at the wedding. So it's like, okay, yeah, word is starting to spread. And Jesus says he is willing. He puts his hand on the man, and then the spots begin to disappear from his skin. Everyone is just watching and staring in disbelief. The man is completely overwhelmed. He hugs Jesus, and Jesus is like, don't tell anybody about this. Just present yourself to the priest. Go make the appropriate sacrifice at the temple. And then Jesus says, does anyone have an extra tunic? And, every disciple just starts falling all over themselves, trying to pull it out. He's like, no, we just need one, just one. And Thaddeus comes over and puts his extra tunic on the man. And Jesus is like, hey, green is definitely your color. And he's just like laughing like, man, I can't believe this just happened. And he's just like, we're just joking about clothing now. Like this, my whole life was my leprosy, and now all of a sudden I just get to talk about what clothes I'm wearing. And he's just, completely overwhelmed by everything. And then cuts to a shot of Tamar, and she seems to realize something, and she runs off. Yeah,
a couple of my favorite lines in that scene, when he walks up, don't turn away from me. And like one of Jesus's utmost concerns seems to be, communicating, I won't turn away from you. Just love that posture. I don't know why it struck me at the end of this scene where Jesus tells him, go to the temple, make the sacrifice that Moses required, and then that line, and then go on your way. Like, there's something about that line that I'm having a hard time articulating in my notes, but there's something about that where it's like, just be about, like, get on to your next chapter. Just go on your, like, don't try to make sense of that whole, don't just head on to whatever's next. Just be on your, like, I wonder how much that's God's perspective in our life. And we're like trying to make the narrative all tie together and be beautiful and all. And I wonder how many times God might look at us and just be like, and go on your way. And that was that. And now go on your way. There's something about that line I really like. I'll be thinking on that for a while.
Yeah, for sure. Then we see Zebedee and Salome, his wife, and she's putting some stuff in a basket. He's raising the basket through the roof for whatever purpose. I'm not really sure. But then he spots his boys coming home, and so everyone runs outside to greet them. And then Jesus walks up, and then Salome walks out, and she sees him, and she's kind of like a little bit starstruck, but then she like falls into this serious face, and she's just staring at him, and she starts talking to her boys while still staring at Jesus, and she's like,
James, John.
Yes, Ema.
Listen to him, please, and stay by his side.
And they're like, okay, yeah, we will. And then John kind of tries to snap her out of her trance, and she's like, oh yeah, come on, everybody come in. She realizes she needs to be hospitable, and then everyone starts to go inside, but Zebedee stops his son and says, hey, what happened to Simon? Did he leave? Did he not stick around? And John's like, no, he's fine. He's got to take care of something, but he's the teacher's pet, so he's good.
This will get a little bit ahead of where we're at, but at Salome's hospitality, like she snaps out of it. She realizes that hospitality that we've often talked about in that Middle Eastern culture. But then later in an upcoming scene, like Peter's going to reference Salome's cooking, and then he's going to get there and he's going to be like, Salome didn't cook, which on some, like my knee jerk was like, well, of course she would have cooked, the hospitality. But then I also thought about the Mary Martha story, and I thought, man, what an interesting play there. Like on one hand, I was like, how could Salome not be cooking in this world of hospitality? And yet I also thought like, but maybe Salome actually gets the bigger picture, the Mary picture rather than the Martha picture. And I wonder if she was like, no, we're not here for that kind of hospitality. We're here for another kind of hospitality, for a different kind of spiritual food, for, yada, yada, yada. I thought maybe I shouldn't be so quick to judge her, Martha, Marty. Man. So good. And
I think you maybe do see her struggling with it a little bit, because at one point,
sure,
as the crowd gets bigger and bigger,
you're right,
she ducks outside and she asks Mara, she's like, hey, can you go over to the neighbor's house and ask for some food? And Mara's like, the neighbor's here at your door like everybody else is.
Right.
And then Mary's like, look, I think they're being fed enough. You don't have to worry about this.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So,
I forgot about that.
She does kind of go back and forth. Like, I think she does realize the gravity of what is happening, but at the same time, she has that instinct of hospitality. So she's going back and forth a little bit. So,
right.
Yeah, that's great. So then we're back with Simon, and he's getting a damp cloth, and he's pressing it on Emma's arm and her forehead, and he's singing over her. And then you go to Andrew in the next room, and he's telling all the stories to Eden about what's been going on. Simon comes out. He's like, yeah, Eden's asleep. And Andrew makes a comment about Simon singing. Eden laughs a little bit. It's like, okay, so here, I guess you picked something up from James. Kind of liked that idea of singing or whatever. And then Simon and Andrew leave, and this is when they make the comment about, yeah, we're going to go get some of Salome's cooking. It's going to be great. And then Matthew shows up, and Simon's like, dude, you got to stop following us. And Matthew's like, I'm not here for you guys. I'm here for the man on the shore. And so Simon kind of freaks out a little bit. He's like, hey, you didn't see anything. Nothing happened. You're a traitor. Just forget about the whole thing. He's like, look, I told Rome about it, and they don't believe me. But I think I do believe it. But I need to know, like, am I being deceived? And Andrew has a great line there, and he's like, what good is our answer if you're not even listening to yourself?
Right. Yep. Yeah, good line.
So then we're back with the Pharisees. Yusuf is preparing. He says he has the scrolls of Isaiah and Malachi for the day's reading for Nicodemus. And Nicodemus is like, I actually need a little bit of time. Can you guys give me the room? And then he's like, Shmuel, hang back with me for a minute. And then we're back to Zebedee, and Zebedee hands Simon some walnuts, and this is where he's like, wait a minute, Salome didn't cook? And he's like, nope. And he's like, oh man, anybody want some walnuts? So then Zebedee starts talking to Jesus. He's like, hey, well, who is your father? Jesus is like, well, he's in heaven now. And he's like, well, tell me about your lineage. And John is like, Dad, what? And Zebedee's like, no, genealogies are great. Like, this is what we talk about. This is important. And he's like, what about pre-exile? Like, who's your tribe? And Salome's like, I think he's from the tribe of Judah. And Jesus is like, well, what makes you say that? He's kind of intrigued by that. But then everyone starts to show up. So Eliel and Mara arrive, and they're the parents of Abigail from episode 3, if you remember. And Mara's like, well, we heard about this parable of the net. I've got some questions. Like, how soon do you think the day is going to come on this? And so Jesus starts telling a story about the wedding and the servants waiting at the gate with lamps. Barnaby and Shula now show up, and Barnaby's making comments about that. And he's like, hey, while you're at it, I heard about that wedding. Can you turn my well into a wine vat like you did at the wedding? That'd be great. Yeah. And then as the crowd continues to grow, Simon grabs John, and he's like, hey, I think it's getting a little too crowded in here. And they have this great little exchange.
I think he can handle anything.
Yeah, well, he called me And if we're not fighting the Romans yet, I want to do something until that time comes.
I told you to catch men.
I don't know what that means.
Exactly. And if he needed you to know what that meant, he would have told you. So just be you. Okay?
Like Simon's just feeling like, what is my place here? I know I've been chosen, and I know I've been called, and I know I've got to have some kind of purpose, but what is it? I don't know what I'm doing here. And so he's trying to like find his place. And, and John seems to have a little bit better perspective there. Like, look, man, we're just along for the ride. So just be you, and we'll figure out what we need to do when the time comes.
Yeah, I could relate to that part of the Peter. Like earlier in the scene, he's like, well, the master is tired. Can you guys not grill him over a bunch of Bible questions? And then later, as the crowds start to show up, like he's always kind of jittery about safety and protection and the crowds. And I just thought, man, that is so often how you put me in a ministry event. Like, give me a big church event, and I am going to be so cranked up about the itinerary and the details and who's coming and whether or not we have enough food and that I'm just going to get lost. And I can totally relate to a Peter trying to make sense out of all that. So, yeah.
And you're scoping out the exits. You always have an exit plan.
Yep, that's definitely Marty. Yep, my introvertedness always needs to know how to get out of a crowd.
Sure.
And then I also liked just the content of that whole, like all the scenes where he's at Salome's house as the crowd and the teachings. Like it really just represents, like she's asking about a parable that really gets told much later in the Gospels. There's all this, like, they didn't try to put a section of the gospel teaching in order from like one of the gospel. They just took a whole smattering of Jesus' teachings and put it together in this scene and had this like ongoing discussion, which I really liked because that's likely much more realistic to how these conversations and these teachings took place that then get packaged by those gospel writers and told in a way because they're trying to do something with their own scenes in the written gospels. But I love what you're seeing in the episode here because that's likely much, much more how, like, Jesus probably told the same parables. Like, Brent, you've hung out with me somewhat. You've traveled to different places do you hear the same lessons from me?
Yep, absolutely.
So
that's what I was just going to say. That's the other alternative is like these stories were told over and over and over again.
Right.
And so we're not saying that the parable of the net wasn't told later on.
Right.
But it was also probably told earlier too.
Exactly. And people are going to be asking like, I was there when you told that parable. Can we go back and talk about that? I love that. It felt very real to me. And I thought that was going to have notes on that.
Yeah, that was one of the things that both of the roundtable commentators were talking about was just that interactive, like there's just a crowd sitting around somebody and everybody's asking questions and the conversation just kind of goes all over the place. And like we hear a lot of Sermon on the Mount stuff as it's cutting between scenes. Like we'll cut back to a scene and we'll see like, the closing line of a particular teaching. And most of those are from the Sermon on the Mount, but there's a lot of stuff from the Sermon on the Mount. So, I think just when you're taking all of Jesus' teachings and putting them into one big discourse like this, you're going to get a lot of that stuff. So, you do see a lot from that Matthew 5-7 portion, but you do have some other stories pulled in from other places too. So,
right. Yep.
So then we're back with Nicodemus and Shmuel, and he says I love this line.
Shmuel, my eyes are tired. Would you mind reading to me from the scroll of the prophet Isaiah?
Yeah, that's a setup. Shmuel knows that's a setup. Everybody knows that's a setup. Gosh dang it.
Yeah, and I think he even kind of rolls his eyes or at least gives some sort of expression that is similar to that. So Shmuel begins reading from Isaiah 40, and Nicodemus is like, no, go down a couple lines. And so he reads the portion, the voice of one crying, and Nicodemus is like, well, who does that sound like? And Shmuel, he's like, that's the heretic John. So they go back and forth on the passage a little bit, and Shmuel is like, look, God can't take human form, so we can't do this. And Nicodemus is like, well, you're putting limits on God. He's like, no, it says it in Deuteronomy, and it says it in Exodus, like all these things, like it's there in the text. And then Nicodemus is like, well, that's your interpretation. Are you limiting God to your interpretation, or do you think you should question your interpretation?
Which, can we just stop here and say, man, what a challenging wrestling match for all of us religious folk in conservative evangelical Christianity. And I'm not saying like challenge and the answer is clear. I'm saying challenge because it's a challenge. Like there's this real tension in their conversation between, is it God or is it Torah? Is God confined by Torah, or is Torah over God, or is God over Torah? And how do you do? Which sounds easy until you think about applying that. Is God subject to the Bible, or is the Bible subject to God? And all of a sudden, that phrase for us hopefully makes the tension and the challenge a little bit more real. But man, what a huge, and I love how you phrased it, Brent, your interpretation of Torah. And how do you do that? How many times do our interpretations of the Bible define God for us, and we end up putting God underneath our interpretations, rather than reminding ourselves that our interpretations most definitely sit underneath God. Our interpretations will often be so finite and so fallible compared to the God who created it all and sits at the top of all of it. Just so good. And you haven't gotten there yet, but gosh dang it, my favorite statement.
We are still students, Shmuel. All of us. Our understanding will never be complete.
Thought that was so good from Nicodemus.
Shmuel says, like, oh man, like, I've been your student for a long time. Your teachings used to be so sturdy. And that's when Nicodemus is like, no, we're always students. We're always learning. We never have a full understanding. And then he brings up the Sadducees, and he's like, look, the Sadducees, they take Torah as inspired, but they disregard everything else. And think about all the stuff that they've missed out on. And Nicodemus is like, well, we can walk the ancient path, referencing Jeremiah, but we can still be open to new things in addition to that. And then their conversation is kind of cut short a little bit. Yusuf comes running in, and he's like, look, this crowd gathering. We're not sure what's going on, but it's not John the Baptist. It's somebody, some normal guy.
Ooh, man, that scene, that is a Bema scene right there. That whole exchange, short little thing, but that exchange between Nicodemus and Shmuel, that is a scene for us to grapple with and wrestle with. I like it.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we use that Jeremiah passage quite a bit too.
Oh, baby. Come to Israel with me. We'll use that up.
So then we're back. Jesus is still teaching, of course. Salome, this is where Salome ducks out and tries to get the food. And Mary's like, they're being fed. Don't worry about it. So then we're back in the house, and Shula is there, and she asks about prayer. And Jesus is like, look, it's fine to do things in secret. And you know, if you're going to do something nice with your right hand, don't let your left hand know about it. And Barnaby's like, how is that even possible? And Jesus is like, just be generous and don't worry about it. So like, that's kind of a fun, like, of course someone would, like, we read the Bible and we're like, what the heck does that mean? But if we were there, we would absolutely ask Jesus to clarify that.
Sure.
I feel like, anyway.
Yeah, sure.
And so I think it's really fun that Jesus is just like, yeah, no, just be generous. He's generous in his offering of interpretation, because I think he understands that Barnaby is there and is asking a sincere question. He's not trying to trap him or trick him with anything. Like,
right.
He's just like, you know, I thought that was a great exchange.
Yep. So
then you see Tamar arrive, and she's got some people with her. And then it cuts over to Gaius and Matthew, and nobody's there at the tax collector booth. And he's like, what's going on here? How long has it been? He's like, an hour, maybe 2. And Gaius is like, is there some kind of Jewish holiday that I don't know about? And Matthew's like, there's a lot that you don't know about. And then Marcus comes up and tells Gaius something, and then Gaius is like, Matthew, just close everything down and go home. And Matthew's like, no, I got to come with you. I got to see what's going on. And he's like, no, there's a mob. He's like, well, how do you think I survived the other 16 hours? And I think Gaius, like all of us, is like, yeah, I don't know. Because it doesn't seem like you should.
That's right.
So then we're back to Jesus. We get another little glimpse of a teaching, and then Tamara's kind of pushing through the crowd. Simon's working the crowd. He's like going around like, hey, can you he's talking about Jesus. He's like, can you believe this guy? He's right there. He's pretty cool, huh? And then Simon looks over and sees Tamar, goes over to her, and he's like, look, there's no way in here. It's too crowded. And Mary's like, well, maybe we should let them in. And this was kind of an interesting mini arc for Mary, because initially she's freaked out by the man with leprosy. And then here she's like, well, we should try to let him in with the teacher. And Andrew's like, look, we're trying to keep this whole thing kind of quiet. This would cause quite a scene if he does something in this big crowd. And Mary's like, yeah, that's probably right. And then is it Tamara, I think, says to Mary, like, well, what would you do if this was you? Like, would you want your friends to try to push through for you? And she's like, oh, I was you pretty recently. And yeah. And so that kind of like shifts for Mary, and she's like, okay. So then Mary's trying to like figure out how this can happen. And Tamara's like, well, what about the roof? And Mary's like, okay, I can take you up to the roof. So there's so much going on in the scene too.
Yeah, there is. It's like it's flowing well, but to talk about it, I realize you're like bouncing back and forth between all these characters coming into the same scene. It
is really like, I think they portray it well as like this big hectic crowd, and Jesus is teaching, other people are trying to get in. We see the Roman soldiers approach. And Simon's like, oh, here's my deal. And Andrew's like, no, I'm going to talk to them because you're just going to cause problems. Let me deal with this.
Right.
Then Matthew comes in, and he's trying to get closer, and people are just pushing him. Like, they turn and they see who it is, and they just push him out of the way. Which, there's no comment on it, but it's just like, oh yeah. And Matthew doesn't like, hey, what do you think you're doing? Like, that's so just what he expects.
Yep, absolutely.
As a tax collector. So then he goes around the corner, and then all of a sudden people are throwing grapes at him, and he's like, oh man, what's going on here? And he turns around, and it's Abigail and Joshua, the two kids who showed up first in episode 3 at Jesus's campsite. And they're like, come on up, let's check it out. So they're actually being friendly for him. And that's a great little scene. Simon comes and kind of pushes Matthew up onto the roof, gives him a little boost. And then Simon starts to explain who Jesus is. And the kids are like, oh yeah, we know him. And so again, Simon is like, what is my purpose here? What am I doing? Everybody already knows who Jesus is. Andrew's handling the Romans. What am I doing? So then Jesus is talking about God clothing people. Then the Pharisees arrive. And some people are like kind of making way for the Pharisees, but then Barnaby's like telling him to be quiet because he's trying to listen. And Shmuel's kind of freaking out, but Nicodemus is like, look, well, this is not our element here. Like, we don't have the kind of authority that we're used to when we're in this part of town. Then Shmuel spots Mary on the roof, and Nicodemus is like, oh man, what is she doing here? And they're starting to kind of put some pieces together. And then Tamar cries out to Jesus from the roof. Jesus of Nazareth, which is as Jesus introduced himself to her when they were walking earlier that day. And then the friends, like, there's already a hole in the roof, which they were saying in the commentary that this was kind of a staging and an episode flow decision on how they did this.
Yeah. I could understand why they did that.
Yeah, but the roundtable people were like, hey, well, I think it was Matthew and Luke that have this story, and they're like, well, Matthew says this, but Luke says this, and he kind of did a pretty good job of like getting elements from both stories together. So
sure. Yep.
There's already the hole in the roof, but it's not quite big enough to fit the friend through, so they start pulling some of the framing apart, and there's some stuff falling down, and I think James and John are like, as their parents' house is being torn apart, they're like, hey, what's going on here?
Well, I thought it was interesting too. Like, she says, Jesus of Nazareth, I saw what you did with the leper. I have a friend. Like, it's clear, like, and Jesus kind of just sits there and sees her and listens to her. He doesn't say yes, but he also doesn't say no. And this whole thing just kind of like evolves and unfolds until at some point he looks up through the roof, and which is going to be a little bit later than where you're at in the scene. And the first time he really says something is he just says, your faith is beautiful.
Yeah.
Because the text does say, when Jesus saw the faith of the friends, like, that's what the Gospels say he noticed.
Right.
Not the faith of the paralytic, but the faith of the friends. And so I love that he just kind of is watching, saying nothing one way or another. And towards the end of this exchange is just going to say, your faith is beautiful. Like, he's moved by their faith. And That's what seems to move, because it's not logic. Because if Jesus is trying to keep a secret, which he is, clearly, even in these episodes, he's not doing a very good job, but he's moved by people's faith, which I think is instructive for us. But nevertheless, pretty good.
Yeah, and we're basically there. Like the disciples help the man get onto the floor, and this is when the Pharisees come up to the window, Shmuel and Yusuf.
Which did you catch? Like, who was in the window before, Brent?
Barnaby and Shula.
Like, and I just went, oh my gosh, isn't that what Pharisees do? Us religious folk. When we have to make it about some issue of theology and some stupid argument, what we really do is we force ourselves in and we take the place of people who actually needed to see Jesus, who actually needed to see God, who actually had a conversation to be had. But here we come with our theological, the theology police, and they just get in the way and literally force other people out of their spot, which is just more poetic, but dang.
And I think we don't actually know who the Pharisees force out, because shortly before that, when Shmuel first starts going through the crowd, Barnaby's kind of back in the crowd, and he's the one who stops him and says, be quiet, I'm trying to listen. So Barnaby had already got his question in,
right?
And then he made room for someone else.
Right. Yep.
And now the Pharisees are pushing that person out.
Sure.
So we don't know who that was, but yeah, that was a great point. So at this point, Shmuel addresses Jesus. He's like, where do you get your authority? Because it's definitely not from anybody in Nazareth. Which I love the little dig on Nazareth. And then Jesus ignores him, and this is the point where he looks up and compliments Tamar's faith.
Right.
And then he looks back down at the man, and he says, your sins are forgiven. And then he turns, and he's talking to the Pharisees. It's like, well, wait a minute, weren't you talking to but he's addressing the Pharisees. Even though he's sort of talking to the man, he's addressing the Pharisees. He's like, look, it's easy to say anything, I know that. But to show you that the Son of Man has this authority, then he turns back to the guy, rise and go, pick up your mat, do all the stuff. And so the man gets up, everyone's cheering. He starts to walk out of the house.
And a little mini scene, somewhere in the middle of all this, was Peter up on the roof. As the man starts to get lowered through the roof, Peter jumps up on the roof behind Matthew. He's kind of having some words with Mary from roof to roof. But one of the things I love that he said to Matthew is, well, at least grab your tablet. Like, you love to write things down. You love to tabulate things. So at least I hope you're like, is this what you wanted? Like, you wanted Jesus to get in trouble. Like here we go. This is what you wanted to see. So at least grab your tablet, which I thought was awesome, because it will be Matthew, according to some theories, my own included, that will be the first one to start writing about who Jesus was and what he did. I know it's common for people to think Mark was written first. I personally think it was Matthew. I loved that little play on, well, at least grab your notepad.
Yeah, I forgot to make a note of that, and that's an amazing point. Yeah. Because that's totally the character of Matthew as he's being portrayed in this episode. Like,
absolutely.
I mean, just earlier in the episode, we talked about, like, he knew exactly how long it had been since Peter was paid up.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, for Matthew to just be ready at any moment to be taking notes on stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent point. So the man starts walking out of the house on his own feet. He's kind of in a little bit of a daze. Like, everyone's cheering. Everyone's like, what is going on here? And then I think it was Shmuel calls out to the soldiers like, hey, this guy's disrupting the peace. Everyone starts to disperse. The soldiers start to move in. They close and lock the door. Simon's like, okay, finally my moment. He grabs Jesus. They sneak out the back door. Nicodemus is out in the square, and he's just watching this man walk away, like in wonder. I feel like is the emotion that he's like, man, I can't, like, I'm seeing this and I'm amazed by it. Not like I can't believe it. It's like, it's here. I have to believe it, and I'm just amazed by it. Is what I was getting from his look there. And so Nicodemus runs around the corner and finds Mary, and is like, look, I got to meet with Jesus. And she's like, but your people are like, you're the ones causing the problems here. He's like, no, those other guys are jealous. I just want to talk to him. Like, I don't care if it's at night. I don't care if it's out in the woods. I don't care, like, whatever. You tell me.
In a tomb, he says. I don't care if it's in a tomb. I was like, whoa. Wow.
Yeah. And she's like, okay, I'll ask. I'll see what's going on. And then we go back to the, behind the house, wherever it is. They're sneaking through a bunch of doorways and stuff. And then Jesus is about to go through a door, and then he stops for a moment and he turns and he sees Matthew and he looks at him, but then he turns around and walks away. And Matthew's like, huh. So that was the end of the episode.
There you go. That was a good one. That had some good moments in it. Things are starting to pick up. This is at the point when I watched through season 1 for the first time. I'm like, all right, we're starting to get to the biblical text. There's a lot of setup episodes, which I didn't hate. But I was like, okay, we're moving now. We're moving. I see you. I see you, Chosen. That was good. I liked it.
This series continues to impress, for sure. I have not really been disappointed yet.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good, Brent.
All right, well, I think that does it for this episode. We managed to talk for less time than the episode ran, so
that's
I
something.
call that a win.
I call that a goal. Yep.
I don't know if I would necessarily say it's a goal. We'll talk about things for as long as we need to talk about them, but it's just nice when it's not too long,
Yeah, all right. I need goals like that to get me to shut up.
All right, well, with that, we'll end this episode. If you want to get a hold of Marty, you can find him on Twitter at Marty Solomon. You can find me at EIBCB, and you can find more details about the show at BamOnEstepship.com. Thanks for joining us on the BAMO podcast. We'll be back next week with episode 7.